Today we are going to discuss about how to create relation. Now in the last video we talked about different types of objects, and one thing some of you have asked me is this L. Now L represents a measure. So for example, you would see that so this is a sales query subject. Now any of the, and these are query items, so any of the query items which will be a fact, meaning it will have some numbers which you will show come up the report. They will typically have something called L's, which represents a measure. So for example, that example of measures are for a sales table, it would be a sell amount or a number of cells. It's some sort of a numbers which should show up in the reports on the main body of the report. Now, but sale date or a sales agent name, these would not be a measure. Measures tend to be always something for numbers. So it could be an inventory amount, a sales amount, and they would typically will have a L. Now, what are these three, three-pronged, colorful thing which you see? These are typically associated with something called dimension. So, for example, if you are plotting the sales amount by agents, then your agent name would be a dimension. Or it could be if you want to show sales volume across regions, so your region name would be dimension. Okay, so now let's talk about relations. Now before we get that, something I would like to show. So let's say after you do the query, after you build your model and get the basic query subjects created through the wizard, you can test and see how it got created. So you can do at any level, you can click and then you can right click and you can do something called test. So if you run a test, it will go to the underlying database and it will try to run the query which is represented by the underlying table. So here you can do test sample. So here what it is trying to connect to the database and it's trying to retrieve the rows. So it's taking a little bit time because I think the connection goes over the network and it's kind of a little slow. Okay, let me cancel it, I think, and we'll try again. Okay, so finally I think the results came. So what you see here is the extract from our sales table. Now if here's something called total rows. So typically if your table has more than, let's say, 100 rows or 10,000 rows, it will give a sample. So here you can set that options. So here it says 25, so you can make it 250 or more depending on how much rows you want to get it in the sample. So the point of showing that is to sort of showing you a way so that you can validate your model to see if things are being retrieved properly. Now where this would be useful, where you have relations. So for example, now let's talk about relations. So we have agent ID from the agents table and agent ID from this, they have a relation. So let's now create and we say relationships. Now remember, if your database has primary key foreign key relations already inbuilt, when you create the model using the wizard at the it gets those relations. But in our example, since we did not have the relations, we are defining it here. Now depending on the situation, you may wish to import or may not import the relations and define within Cognos the relations, or you can import some and then define more relations within Cognos. So depending on a situation, you can do various things. So here we already have, as you see, Cognos has already recognized the agent ID and it has already created this relation. So now other thing is that you have to define the cardinality. Now let's look at it carefully. What it says here is that so here it says 1:1, meaning it represents the left box. So what that means is that each cells has one and only one agent. So which is pretty much the case in our in our simple model, where we say that each cell could be only connected with one agent. Now then this side it says each agent sends one or more cells. Now for example, but you can be a situation where it could be an agent can be having 0 cells, right? So we should select 0n. So that as you select 0n, this also statement gets modified. So now it says each agent has 0 or more cells. So let's look at all the options in the drop down. So where you have 1:n, 1:1, 0:n, and 0:1. So I think these things are self-explanatory. Only thing you have to be careful is which side represents 0, which side represents n. And then operators, you have 0, equal to, greater than, etc. For typical, most of the cases you would have the you will keep these as equals to, and you will play with these numbers 1:1, 0:n. Okay, so now let's now before you hit OK, you can look at the relationship SQL, which is pretty straightforward. So here it is just showing you the join, and since our particular case it is a 0 or n, you see it is doing an outer join. So those of you who are familiar with the database and SQL probably know what is the outer join. So we once we press OK, then Cognos would create the relation. Now after creating the relation, what you should do, you should test the relation. Now to test the relation, the way to test is you should maybe click agent and name column, and then try to join with the cells, and then do right click and test. So what we are doing is that we are picking up few columns from each of the tables and really running a test to verify if our join has been created and was that the right join to create. So as you see, it looks fine. It is it is underlining queries. It is simply joining these two tables through the join through the agent ID join we created. So you have so that looks the desired result. I mean, basically what you are verifying here is that you are assuming joining these two tables with a outer join, and then as you see, few cells people don't have any cells, so they have 0. And you can see also the underlining query. So underlining query, Cognos has its own represented own SQL, but also it has also the native version of the SQL, which is the database. So let's create one more join. So for example, we have region, and here and on the agent also we have region. So create relationship, then we have, so each regions can only have only one and one region, and each region has one or more regions. It could be also 0 or more. So that's our, so that's that's about the relations. So let's recap the relations quickly. So relations can be defined, can be inherited from your underlining model, where if you have primary key foreign key relations defined, or you may and also you can create them within Cognos. You can have several combination of these two. You can inherit some from the database, you can add more. While creating relation, please don't forget to test. And to see all the relations you've created, you can double click at a namespace level and it will show you all the relations. So in our particular case, you have seen these are, we have 4 query subjects and we have 2 relations. And if you click here, it'll show you the, you can click edit.